On the 11th of March 1921, a shift foreman named Emmett Voss climbed down the man cage of the Bonnie Ridge mine outside Webb City, Missouri, into ground the company had already marked for retirement. He was 36 years old, and he had worked the zinc fields of Jasper County since he was a boy, trailing his father's dinner pail down that same shaft. And in 15 years underground, he had learned the particular boredom of a played-out drift, the way the walls go quiet and the ore thins to streaks, and a man spends more time timbering dead ground than breaking rock. The Bonnie Ridge's fourth level had been drawing down for 2 years. Zinc prices had collapsed after the war ended, and the shell foundries stopped buying, and half the shafts in the district were pulling their pumps and letting the water climb. Voss had orders to inspect the fourth level one final time before the company sealed the pump station and let it flood. He was not looking for anything. He was closing a door that was already closing itself. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. What he found, according to the account his daughter later gave to a regional historian collecting oral testimony from the district in the 1970s, was a staircase. Not a ladder bolted to a wall, not a rough set of steps hacked into ore rock, the way miners sometimes cut a shortcut between levels, but a finished staircase, built of white marble, descending into a passage that appeared on no survey the company had ever filed. 10 steps, by Voss's count, each one cut and fitted without visible mortar, worn smooth down the center the way stone wears under the passage of many feet over a long span of years. Marble does not belong in the ground under Jasper County. The bedrock there is Mississippian limestone, chert, and dolomite, the same rock that had carried lead and zinc ore through 60 years of drilling, and a man who had mucked that rock his whole working life knew the difference between what the earth had made and what a hand had shaped. Voss stood at the top of that staircase with his carbide lamp throwing a small circle of light down 10 marble steps into a dark the lamp could not reach the bottom of, and by his daughter's account, he did not go down. He was not alone in the drift that day. A younger trammer named Cyrus Pruitt, 19 years old and 8 months into the job, had been running ore cars on the same level and followed Voss's lamp back to the head of the passage out of plain curiosity. By the account passed down through the Voss family, Pruitt looked down the staircase for perhaps 10 seconds, said nothing at all, and then asked to be moved to a different level before the shift was out. He got his transfer. 3 weeks later, he quit the Bonnie Ridge entirely, and within the year he had left mining for good, to work at a livery stable in town, a trade with considerably worse pay and considerably more daylight. He never told anyone what he had seen beyond what Voss himself already described, and when a cousin asked him once, late in life, why he had walked away from mining wages for stable work, he said only that some things underground were not worth the money either. He rode the cage back up and reported what he had seen to the mine captain, a report that, by every rule of how a 1920s zinc operation kept its books, should exist today in some company ledger or state inspection file. It does not. What the staircase looked like in more detail comes mostly from Voss himself, repeated to his family across the decades that followed, and set down finally by the historian who interviewed his daughter in 1978. 10 risers, each a single slab, not stacked block, but full-depth marble cut deep enough to bear weight without cracking. Voss described the color more than once in retellings passed down through the family, a white stone veined faintly with gray, cool under his hand in a way the surrounding rock never was, even after he had stood beside it for several minutes with a lit lamp near his palm. He remembered it as clean, cleaner than anything else in that mine, as if the ordinary dust of the working level had simply declined to settle on it. The stone showed tool marks near the base of each step, fine parallel scoring that Voss, no stranger to blasting and drilling, said matched nothing used in that mine and nothing he had seen used anywhere in the district. The edges of each step were finished square, with no chipping and no rough tooling left for a mason to dress down later. Along the right-hand wall of the passage, waist height, ran a rail groove cut into the living rock, smooth-sided, as though something had once been fitted there and taken away. There was no way, by the mining geology of the 1920s, for a formation like that to occur naturally, and there was no way, by ordinary commerce, for it to have arrived there by accident either. The nearest commercial marble quarries of any scale in 1921 sat in southwestern Missouri's own Ozark counties on a small scale, and in Georgia and Vermont at industrial scale, hundreds of miles from Jasper County in every direction. Finished marble of that quality moved by rail in the 1920s for courthouses, banks, and monuments, and every such shipment left a trail, a supplier, an invoice, a freight manifest, a building it was destined for. No such record connects any marble shipment to the Bonnie Ridge mine or to any company operating in that stretch of the district. Marble is not a structural material in a hard rock drift. It does not shore a ceiling or floor a haulage way. Nobody carries marble a quarter-mile underground and finishes it like a courthouse lobby unless the finishing is the point of carrying it, and nobody does that without leaving the kind of paper trail that a working mine's own accountants would have had every reason to keep. What happened next is where the story stops being about a staircase and starts being about a silence. Voss's report, filed the same week by his own later account, never appears in the Bonnie Ridge's surviving daybook, the ledger the company kept for exactly this kind of thing. Shift notes, incident reports, anything a foreman needed the office to know before the next crew went down. The daybook survives. It sits today in a regional mining collection, catalogued and available to anyone who wants to read it. The entries for the week of March the 11th, 1921, are intact and unremarkable right up until the day Voss says he made his report. Then there is a gap of 4 days, not torn pages, not a missing section. The book simply skips. The entry for March the 11th followed directly by one dated March the 15th, written in a different clerk's hand, noting only that the 4th level pump station had been sealed ahead of schedule. Ahead of schedule is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The company's own production records show the pump station was budgeted to run another 6 weeks. It was closed in 4 days instead, the level flooded, and the crew that had been drawing pay to work it reassigned to a shaft 2 miles east before the month was out. Voss himself left the company within the year and moved his family 60 miles south, out of the mining district entirely, into farm work he had no prior experience in and, by his daughter's account, no particular enthusiasm for. He never went underground again. Asked late in life why he had left a trade he had worked since childhood, he told his daughter only that some ground was not worth what it paid. The oral history project that eventually preserved Voss's account was not built to chase strange stories. It was a modest county effort, typical of the 1970s, aimed at recording the ordinary memories of aging miners and their families before that generation was gone. Shift schedules, wage disputes, the sound of the whistle at quitting time. The interviewer who sat with Voss's daughter that year was working through a list of names supplied by the local historical society, gathering material for what became a bound collection of transcripts now held in a university regional archive. Voss's staircase appears in that collection as roughly 4 pages out of several hundred, filed alongside accounts of cave-ins, wage strikes, and Sunday baseball leagues, with no special emphasis given to it at all. It was preserved not because anyone thought it remarkable, but because the project preserved everything, and the staircase happened to be sitting inside one family's ordinary memory when the tape recorder was running. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. To understand how a staircase like that could go unrecorded and unrecovered for a century, you have to understand how a mine like the Bonnie Ridge actually worked, because the geology of the Ozark uplift is not the tidy layer cake most people picture when they think of a mine. The Tri-State District, spanning the corner where Missouri meets Kansas and Oklahoma, was worked hard for nearly 70 years by dozens of independent operators, sinking shafts wherever a drill core showed color, with almost no coordination between them and almost no unified survey of what lay beneath. Levels ran into other companies' levels. Old workings from the 1880s were routinely rediscovered, flooded, and forgotten by crews drilling in the 1920s who had no idea they were there. A passage with no company survey attached to it was not a rarity in that ground. It was the ordinary condition of working it. So when a foreman says he found 10 marble steps at the end of a passage nobody had mapped, he is not describing something the district's own history makes implausible. He is describing exactly the kind of gap the district was full of, and asking why, of all the things a played-out drift could hide, this was the one an entire crew was pulled off in 4 days flat. There is an ordinary reading of all this, and it deserves to be taken seriously, because most of the time the ordinary reading is the correct one. Maybe Voss's memory, filtered through 50 years and retold by a daughter who was a child when it happened, simply grew sharper edges with each telling. Maybe the marble was salvage, hauled down from a demolished building somewhere on the surface and used to shore a section for reasons no surviving record explains, and the finish he remembered as fine tool work was only good luck and bad lighting. Maybe the daybook gap is nothing stranger than a clerk falling behind and backdating an entry, the kind of small bookkeeping lapse that turns up in ledgers from that period if you look hard enough. Each of these holds up on its own. What is harder to hold up is all of them together: the missing report, the 4 days instead of 6 weeks, the crew moved off the district entirely, a teenage trammer who traded mining wages for stable work rather than say what he saw, and a foreman who spent his whole working life underground and chose, for the rest of his life, not to go back. The Bonnie Ridge staircase would be easy to file away as one man's story if it stood alone, but it does not stand alone, and the pattern is what keeps pulling researchers back to it. In the old lead belt of southeastern Missouri, in the workings around Bonne Terre, miners in 1938 reported breaking into a chamber lined with dressed stone blocks, fitted without mortar, at a depth the company's own geologist could not account for given the surrounding rock. 2 men who were on that crew gave brief, matching descriptions to a county newspaper before the company asked them not to speak further on the subject. The newspaper account, brief as it was, used a detail almost identical to Voss's. The miners described the joints between blocks as fitted so tightly that a knife blade could not be worked into the seam. The company's response was fast and total. The chamber was backfilled within the week, the crew reassigned to a different shaft entirely, and the discovery survives today only in that single newspaper item and a paragraph of a retired engineer's memoir, self-published decades later, that the mining industry never engaged with. 1,600 miles east of nothing in particular but a shared bedrock, in the fluorspar country of southern Illinois near Rosiclare, a 1944 account describes a drilling crew striking what one miner called a finished floor, level and smooth, across an opening wider than the drift itself, at a point where no natural bedding plane should have produced anything but broken rock. That crew, too, was pulled and reassigned within days, and the finished floor was never independently surveyed before the shaft flooded for good in the 1950s. The miner who first described it told a nephew, decades later, that the floor had been swept clean of the ordinary rock debris that litters a working drift, in a way no natural fracture ever produces, as though someone had finished the job long before and simply left. In both cases, as at the Bonnie Ridge, the men who found the stonework were moved off the discovery immediately, the site was closed faster than ordinary operations required, and the paper record that should have documented a genuine engineering anomaly simply does not exist. 3 different mines, 3 different decades, 3 different ore bodies, with nothing geologically in common except the hard dolomite and limestone of the central and southern mid-continent. And in each case the same shape recurs: finished stonework, where the geology allows for none, a fast and disproportionate institutional response, and a record that goes quiet exactly where it should be most complete. Nobody is claiming these are the same structure, built by the same hands, or separated by less than centuries. The claim is narrower and harder to explain away. This specific shape, worked stone found deep in unglamorous industrial ground and then swiftly closed off, keeps turning up in company town archives that never spoke to each other, decades and states apart, among men who had no reason to compare notes and no way to have invented the same account independently. If any part of the Bonnie Ridge account is taken at face value, it asks something uncomfortable of the history of that ground. A finished marble staircase, built with toolwork a 1920s miner did not recognize, sitting in a passage with no company survey, in bedrock that does not produce marble, is not a formation. It is a structure, and a structure implies a builder, and no builder recognized by the standard record of that district's past explains 10 fitted marble steps and a rail groove cut into living rock at the bottom of a zinc shaft. Whatever that staircase actually is, its steps were already worn smooth by footsteps before Voss ever set eyes on them, which means the building of it belongs to a period the standard record of that ground has no place for. That is not proof of anything beyond the ordinary limits of a company's own paperwork. It is a debt the record owes and has never paid. The Bonnie Ridge itself is gone in every practical sense. The shaft was capped in the 1960s when the last of the district's mines closed for good, and the fourth level has been underwater for longer than most of the men who worked it were alive. Nobody is going back down to check. But one piece of the account did not go under with the rest of it. Voss's daughter, interviewed in 1978, told the historian that her father had kept something, a broken fragment of white stone, palm-sized, with a shallow curve worn into one face, that he said he had picked up not from the staircase itself, but from the passage floor near its top step, before he turned around and climbed back to the cage without going down. He kept it in a cigar box for the rest of his life, and would not say why. The fragment passed to his daughter, and by her account it remains in the family today, unanalyzed by any geologist, and unphotographed for any survey. A single piece of worked white stone, whose only claim to significance is the story attached to it, and the fact that a man who never spoke of that day again could also never bring himself to throw it away. Return to Voss, standing at the top of the stairs. He held his lamp out over 10 marble steps that had no business existing in that rock, in that decade, under that company's authority, and he made a choice that the record of his life never shows him reconsidering. He climbed back up. The report he wrote that week never made it into a ledger built to hold exactly that kind of report. He worked 4 more days on ground the company was in an unexplained hurry to flood, then left the trade his father and his father's father had worked, and spent the rest of his life close enough to that ground to farm it, never again willing to go beneath it. Somewhere under Jasper County, past a sealed cage and 60 years of rising water, 10 steps of finished marble are still descending into rock that geology says should never have held them, exactly where a foreman left them the day he decided some ground was not worth what it paid. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.